First of all, thank you for those of you who are staying here for our talk back. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge some people that without their support, we would not have a community theater, and even more so, we would not have José Cruz González here if it weren't for them. Yes! I first want to acknowledge those members that are on the Arts Council. If you're on the Arts Council, can you give us just a wave in the air here? Thank you. If you see these people in the air, okay? Without the Arts Council, we would not have a lot of things devoted to the arts in our community, and without them, we would not have had most of Madera Theatre Project. If you were on the Madera Theatre Project board, will you please raise your hands? Very good. Very good. Thank you, those of you that are on the board, for spearheading this. It's good to have community theater in Madera. Okay, lastly, I'd like to thank those members of the school board and their superintendent. If you're on the school board, or if you're Mr. Lyle, will you please just raise your hand? Thank you. Very good. And for those of you that don't know, Madera Theatre Project is a partnership with the school districts. We bring our programs in the school as well as the arts together, so it's great to have that type of support in this community. But without further ado, the man, the myth, the legend, the reason why you're all here right now, can we please give another warm round of applause and welcome to José Cruz González. All right, Mr. Gonzalez, we are dying to know everything about you. But let's start with just a few sentences. Tell us who you are, what is the work that you do, and where can we currently find you? Not in a creepy way, but tell us where are you right now? What do you do?
Great. Well, first of all, I just want to thank you for the invitation to come to your beautiful community, and to the commitment that you're making to the arts here is so important. You know, it's art that helps illuminate sometimes the world and can make us laugh, can touch us in profound ways, make us think, make us question, you know, what a beautiful place. As we drove, my wife and I, here today, we passed through so many places I've never been before. I was born and raised here in California, and I went through the 41 highway, the 145, I'd never been there, and I passed through so many little communities here, and I told my wife, I could have grown up in any of those communities. So to see what you're doing here, the commitment to this community is so important. So thank you for your belief, your support, and keep going. Yes. So, who am I? Born and raised here in California. My parents were farm workers, and I grew up doing the work that my grandparents and parents were doing. And it wasn't until I left to go to college that I didn't have to work in field work anymore, or cannery work, or that kind of thing. And so my wife was reminding me that, she said, when did you write this play? And I said, 1989. So I think we did the math, and it's about 33 years ago. So it's been many, many years since we saw this play. So it was nice to return back to it and see it from a different perspective. I'm an older man now, and when I wrote this, I was a young man. And I was trying to explore many things, question many things, trying to make sense of many things. And so it was actually great to revisit and go, wow, I see some of those threads that are still in my work today. And so I can't, I'm just going to be thinking about it all night and for the next, the drive home and that sort of thing. But this piece came out of growing up in a little town called Watsonville. And there, when we first arrived, my mother was a widow with 4 little boys at 29. And she'd come to live with my grandmother and grandfather. My grandmother was a strawberry woman. My grandfather was a lettuce man. So those are the jobs that they had. And so when we arrived, one of my first homes was a barrack, old Bracero barracks, you know, where they would bring the migrant workers from Mexico to work during the World War II and back even up to the 60s. And so that was sort of the world I grew up in. And, you know, as I started to explore writing, I wanted to tell that story. Because I didn't see any of that in the theater that I was being trained in. You know, I went to college to study the crafts of theater and went on to graduate school, and I didn't see that on our stages in America, and I didn't see many writers writing about that, and so that's where my sort of interest went, and I've really been grateful because I've been able to tell that story that I didn't hear.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We've talked a lot amongst the cast and crew as to how relevant many of the issues that you touch on in the play relate to today. I know you've mentioned that. And I have a few, we've kind of touched on this already, just based off of some of the history you just shared. But one of the questions we were dying to know is, what personal connections do you have to the story, which you shared? And who are these characters to you? You mentioned your mother was a strawberry picker. I can't help but think your mother is Gloria. Is that fair to say? Who are the characters to you?
Well, you know, they're composites of people I knew, people I grew up with. It is trying to celebrate my family and taking pieces of different people and trying to tell that story. I remember the character of Soto in this story. My grandfather took me once to a place where when we first arrived to live in Watsonville, there's a place called Pájaro. And Pájaro is a bird, you know, Pájaro is a bird in Spanish, right? And there's a river there, and right by that river was a little trailer park where we first lived, my mother told me. And then right across the street from it, there was this building that eventually, when I went off to college and would come back home, it had become a Mexican restaurant, and on it was this incredible mural. So it was just really, really beautiful. But just on the other side of Pájaro, my grandfather took me once to a friend's house, and it was a little shack of a home. And we walked in, and I don't know what they were talking about. I was just a little kid. But I looked at his, the wall, and on this wall, I don't know if it was a crate that was kind of like a shelf that he, you know. I mean, you're talking about really salt of the earth people here, right? But here on that little, you know, crate was this medal. This guy was a veteran, an American veteran, who was a farm worker. And it was like, we have heroes that I know nothing about. They're just understated, they're quiet, they just do their work, they raise their families, you know? And I said, I've got to tell those stories. So Soto, there's that moment for me of trying to, you know, tell that story. Eventually my brother would go off to Vietnam and, you know, serve. It's really an amazing story to see him return back, you know. He was a young man still really trying to find out where he fit in the world. He didn't quite know. School wasn't his thing, but he was smart. And, you know, and I would have cousins that would then go off to Vietnam. You know, two cousins met each other in Vietnam. You know, they had to go across the world to actually hook up and connect. And so there's, you know, a little bit of that there with my brother. I got to keep the albums. I wish I had them still, because that'd be really super cool.
Even the Carlos Santana's?
Oh my God, Carlos Santana. Yeah, oh my God. Yeah, so Gloria, my mom, you know, she just was to me like she's just an amazing woman. My father, there's a lot of my father in Ben because he was this good-looking guy. He was really good-looking, and but I never got to know my father because he died when I was 5. He died of a heart attack. He was a farmer, and so I think in one sense this young boy is me trying to figure out who am I. What am I? Where do I come from? I'm, being a child with grandparents saying, well, you're Mexican. Well, no, not really. I live here, but I'm not really Mexican. And then my friends say, well, you're American. And I think for a lot of young people, and I don't know, I would be interested to hear from the young people here what that journey is like for them. But I know for me, looking back in time, it's trying to understand where do I belong, who am I, and what's my identity, and trying to figure that out. And then, it gets complicated because you're a teenager on top of that, and so you're having all sorts of problems, right? And so I think this play was trying to help me figure out who I was, who I wanted to be. And, I think at that point I was a young father, and my grandfather was my father figure. So it was just trying to make sense of all those things. Yeah. And I think for me, art has been the thing that's helped heal me and helped me sort of step into the world.
The witness all choked up over there. You talked about providing identity. Holy moly. We have felt that through your work in this show. And I know Tomas here can definitely probably speak to this as being a young actor in the show. In fact, Tomas, would you like to share a little bit about some of the conversations we had about our connections with the work?
Yeah, a lot of the time we were kind of not really confused, but we were more like mystified at how accurate a lot of these characters portrayed a lot of our family members. Also, a lot of the relationships that they have between each other and a lot of the actions that they have committed were very eerie to watch because a lot of us have experienced something similar like that. Like for example, having like only one parent in the household, that's a big thing that I know some of us in the cast actually have to go through and had to go through as like a younger person. And being able to identify with that and seeing that other people are going through something similar was very comforting. Even though it was a little scary sometimes, like Ruben being Ruben, and knowing that there's those people out in the world, it helped us center ourselves in the work because we knew we weren't just telling our story, but we were also telling other people's stories as well.
That's pretty remarkable, right? The young person is telling us that things haven't changed much. That they're still struggling, they're still trying to find themselves, and I think that you were together here doing it is really an affirmation. You bringing these artists together, the support this community is helping to do, because you get to talk things out. Oftentimes we don't get to talk things out. And here in the art world, you can talk about these things and question assumptions, and begin to go, gosh, you are like me. Tú eres mi otro yo, So yeah, it's real.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the character Mariluz. One question that came up, and in fact we have our Mariluz front and center right here.
I didn't ask the question.
This question does not come from Mariluz, but it does come from other members of the cast. One question that was asked just in conversation was, the events in the play, are they strictly Mariluz's memory of these things, or are they fact?
Well, it's based in historical, history. But a lot of it is also my own experience and my own imagination, and gosh. Yeah, it's a mixture of all those things. I think looking back now, 33 years ago when I wrote this and going, gosh, I'm really trying to explore my own past in storytelling here and looking at that. And now looking back at it, I go, boy, you know, you could have done this, you could have done that, you know, you could make that better, you know. It's what was the question?
Do you think that everything was happening, like, you know, they're all coming out of her mural? Do you think everything was happening the way she saw it, or is
Yeah.
it?
So what I felt about, leave that right there, about this mural was a mural that she painted for him. And that there's magic in love. There's magic in leaving something behind for someone to discover when they're ready to discover it. And for him to come here, who's a troubled teen, he has no sense of direction, he's not talking to his dad, he just doesn't want to listen to his father. And he's, you know, like all teenagers, you know, they're trying to figure out themselves. And he comes here, and he comes with this fruit tree, not really sure what the heck to do with this. And then suddenly, this world opens to him that's been waiting for him. And, you know, if we had the grandfather, we had a mother, we had a father who could tell us these stories, we would absorb that. But here in this magical place, the theater, and in this mural, we leave a story there. If you've ever been to Mexico, you'll see the murals of these great muralists where they tell the history, but they do it in such a beautiful way. You start to look and you go, wow, those people look like me. You know, there's something really powerful about that. And so I always thought it was waiting for him. That gift was waiting for him. And ultimately, he's able to sort of take something away that will prepare him for the journey he's about to face in his future.
Okay, beautiful, thank you. All right, and moving on to our next question. How, if any, or at all, would you say that Chicano murals play a role in your life currently?
Right. I love Chicano art. You know, I love the music. I love, you know, if I could salsa dance, I'd love this. I think what helped me with art making and murals are one of those things is that I'm able to pick up pieces of art and claim it. There are other artists out there in the world making that, and it's an affirmation of who I am, of my community and culture. And that's really, really important because you don't feel alone, you don't feel isolated, you don't feel like, you know, yeah, you know, there's thousands of years of history here, you know, and it's still there despite the conquest of the New World. You know, we still have it, we still exist. You know, there's still indigenous blood moving through these veins, you know, and we have a long memory. We've had to reclaim what was taken. And I think through art, we can do that. We can say, let's tell a story.
Amen.
Let's paint a story. Let's create a song. Let's create a dance.
Absolutely. We have a lot of young people involved in the Madera Theatre Project, and a lot of our students, especially at Matilda Torres High School, are familiar with your work. We've read your scripts, and those adults in the community know that magical realism, it is your jam. It is something that you do beautifully in your work. Can you tell us a little bit about what draws you to magical realism? Why include it in so many of your pieces?
Sure. So, what is magical realism, right? I mean, if you know, it's magical realism. The way to describe it is this way, for me. My mom would be ironing, you know, and we'd be watching television on the, you know, living on the carpet as kids, and she's ironing her clothes, right? And suddenly the door might creak open, And, she'd say, oh, that's your father walking through the house. Now, in a Western point of view, you'd go, ghosts. Or she's crazy, she's lost her mind. But in this other sort of mixture, Mexican indigenous world, you go, yeah, that's an ancestor. We celebrate the Day of the Dead. We honor and remember our ancestors, right? We're not afraid of them. We go and actually put food on the we might, the cemetery plot, flowers and stuff, leave, marigold flowers so that, people can find their path to home and that sort of thing. And so it's a part of life that we just accept it. So, yeah, I think that's this magical realism thing is a way that I can take that I don't know how to say this, but this a way to say it in a different way, I guess, and 100 Years of Solitude. If you know that novel, a mother finds out that her son is killed by where he is murdered. The blood comes like a little trickle, like a river, to her feet. And that's like, wow, that's really beautiful. Poetic. And it's trying to find the poetic in storytelling in that way. That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect.
Woo! Yes. Such wisdom, such wisdom. There could have been a lot of names for the play. Tell us why Harvest Moon was the title that you chose.
Right. Well, God, I don't even remember anymore. Well, harvest, we were always harvesting, we were always growing stuff. And I love the moon. To me, the moon conjures things. It invites possibility. It invites magic. It gets the imagination, moving. And so there's something really beautiful about that. And I just, this is, I think, my first full-length play that I've written. And it was just, yeah, it's got to come out of that world. So.
I love that. The magic of the moon. Definitely. And we definitely feel that in your work. Let me rephrase the question. How important is it, or why do you think it's important to share these Latinx or these Chicano stories, experiences in your work?
Right. Great story. Great question. I think it's really, really important because, we have so many communities in this country, and I think it's really important for those artists that come out of those communities to tell their stories, to tell that story, because they find it universal. And that's the key, is trying to find a way that an audience that maybe is not from that culture can still connect to it. That's the trick, and I'll give you an example. I have a current piece that's been traveling around the country called American Mariachi.
Yes.
And in that piece, it's a story of the 1970s and young women who decide they're going to learn to play mariachi music. And it's the 1970s, and mariachi music is taught from fathers to sons, not fathers to daughters. But the reason why this young woman, Lucha is her name, wants to learn to play this one song that her mother loves, because she's battling dementia, early onset dementia. And so she has to find enough crazy women to say, yeah, well, let's start this band. And of course, the whole world's against them, right? And so the trick was trying to find, as we developed this over 2 years, that in that story, for the audience members that were dealing with dementia, with their, a lot of baby boomers are dealing with their parents now. My mother has dementia. And she didn't have it at the time I started that play. And so, so there was that aspect. Audiences connected with that. The other side, audiences connected with women from the 1970s. Wow, that's really cool, and the bell-bottom plants, and they were so cool and everything. And it was a different time, but also mariachi music. So it was taking those different elements and combining them to bring this audience together, and it was really cool to see a mixture of audience, from patrons, season subscribers, to new audiences. And I love that alchemy, because something happens magically there when you have an audience interacting with one another. When I was a young person, a young student in college, my wife and I, Corey, went to see Zoot Suit. Zoot Suit was a play by Luis Valdez from El Teatro Campesino from many, many years ago, one of our first Chicano artists, first Chicano play to go to Broadway.
Oh, we are familiar.
I'm sorry?
We are familiar.
Oh,
In fact, we
okay.
have someone in our one of our designers, and the adult Manuel played El Pachuco
Yeah.
just last year. Antonio, where are you? Oh, he's right here.
Good job.
And Cecilia, and our Gloria.
That's
was also
awesome.
in Zoot Suit.
So I was at the Aquarius Theater. We went to see Zoot Suit. I was maybe 20, 19, 20, we don't know, I don't remember anymore. But I saw audience members there, Latino and non-Latino. And it was so exciting to see that happening. And I go, that's the future. That's the future. And I would be privileged to be one of those folks that would be able to step into that many years later. It's really important that, our young people have these opportunities, and they get bit by the bug, the theater bug. Some may go onto that path, and some may not, and that's okay, but they've had that experience. And that experience is really vital, because people have open minds, about the world. They're curious. Theater people are curious. All artists are curious. And I think that's one of the things I'm always curious. I have curiosity. I want to find out about this and whatnot, and find out about that. So I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did.
Just went off the
Beautiful.
tangent
Amen.
all the time.
So, American Mariachi, all you other directors, I call dibs. You heard that? I call dibs, you can't have one. All right, tell us a little bit about who influences you in your writing.
Sure. Well, Luis Valdez, El Teatro Campesino. My whole sort of dream as a college student was to go work with Teatro Campesino, because that's when I saw them perform. I'd never seen that before. I never saw my community reflected on stage. I never saw it. And I thought, that's what I want to do. And so I read everything I could at that time. And in that time, there was nothing in a library. Now today, there's books of Latinx work. But back then, there was nothing. So I really had to sort of school myself and find anything I could find on it. And I had the privilege to spend a summer as an intern with Campesino, and I thought that's where I was going to go. And then they closed their doors for a time. And so that set me on a different path. And that path would take me to Orange County, to a professional theater company there called South Coast Repertory. And I would spend 11 years there as a professional director and project director of a program called the Hispanic Playwrights Project. So this is back in the mid-1980s. And the thing that I loved about what South Coast was doing, it was one of the leading theaters in the country that produced, developed, commissioned new work, new plays. And I got to started out as a lowly PA, like production assistant, Xeroxing scripts, sharpening pencils, making coffee, reading stage directions. But I was in a room where a director, a playwright, and actors were working, and I began to get excited about new plays and how new plays are created. Because for most students, they don't have that opportunity. They get a play that's already been done. you know? In this place, it was like being invented right there on the spot, and I love that. And so when it came time to do something for the theater in terms of this grant that we'd gotten for me to be there for a year, they said, well, what do you want to do? And you want to direct a play and, you know, run for a couple of weeks? I said, no, I have another idea. I said, what if we did a new play festival for Latino writers? And they said, well, are there Latino playwrights? And I said, of course there are. And I crossed my fingers. And so this is Orange County, California, by the way. So this is very conservative. But South Coast was one of the leading regional theaters in the country. And they just said, well, let's do it. So in 1985, 86, we put a national call out to playwrights across the country. We got 109 plays that came in. And we ended up bringing, I think, 8 writers to South Coast. And it got attention around the country. And so theaters began to come and see what we were doing there. And then out of that, we ended up producing 2 world premieres the following year from that batch of plays. Well, now that was successful, and I got to be there, you know, developing this project. And so it would last for 19 years, the Hispanic Playwrights Project. It produced Pulitzer Prize winners. It produced people who are working in the industry in film and television. But the really cool part is a lot of them now teach in universities and colleges across the United States. Yeah. And they're there for you guys. They're there for you. If this is something you want to pursue, they're out there. You can ask her, and I can help you with that, because they're there. There's so much talent.
Yes, Viva. We'll be sharing his cell phone number after.
Yeah, sure. So here's a question. Was writing the family dynamic in Harvest Moon difficult or cathartic? Also, have there been many people who have told you that they relate to the portrayal of Latino/Mexican families in your plays?
Yes, it's cathartic because it's therapy. It really is. It's therapy for me. And yes, people have come up and said, yeah, that's my story, or yeah, I knew that person, or yeah, that experience that's been happening. It's an honor to be able to tell a story. You don't know how people are going to, but you pull it from you, and it's so fascinating to see how similar we are in so many ways in our experiences. Yeah. Oh, we can take questions from the audience?
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
I was just going to say, it's about that time. All right, friends, if anyone has a question, if you yes, Josiah, I'm asking you real loud and clear. Use your theater voice, please. Okay, go ahead and stand.
Okay, so one question I had, with the play, beautifully written by the way. One thing I had is with the strikers, with things going on, the marches, things like the NFWA. During all this time, was there like any stories or any memories that actually inspired you to write this play, or was this something just recent?
Yeah, so, you know, during my time as a young person, the union was dealing with different crops. So they weren't all the different, all the crops. And so it was, for me at that time, there was a debate in our own family about it, and there was fear, a lot of fear, but Luis and Valdez and his brother Daniel, who I've worked with many times over the years, I said to them, I asked them once, we were working on a piece of mine, and I said, how is it that you guys, how did that happen for you? He said, my mother was an activist. She said, right or wrong, man. And it was like, their mother was the one that inspired them to, step up and, Cesar Chavez was a veteran. A lot of our vets that came back from World War II were the ones that would start foundations to help make social change happen in our country, and those are leaders that, Dolores Huerta, come on, she was a school teacher, they saw two worlds, right? And we're fearless. And I hope that.
Absolutely.
So, were you ever scared to join the world of theater? Because as you said before, there was not a lot of resources, there was no one who really looked like you. And I know me, as someone who is going into theater, I am very scared. Not in a bad way, because I'm still going into it, and I know that I'm cheesy, but I want to be the change that I want to see in the world. So, were you...
That's a really great question. My grandmother said to me, Mimo, go work in a nice office with a suit and, nice shoes. It's nice and cold, nice and cool in there. It's clean. That's the job you should get. And I thought, no, I want to do something different. It's crazy. But I had nothing to lose. I had nothing. I didn't have anything that anchored me in this. This was my jam. This was what brought me joy. And if I didn't do it, I would have been a whole different person. I would have been a sad person, I think. Okay. The other thing is really, really important is pursue your dream and work at your craft. It's really important that you also think about the world that you want to build. And the thing is you have to have, first of all, it's either a family that supports you and believes in you and loves you unconditionally, because this world will break your heart. 2, if it's not family, then it's friends. Friends, you need a community. And if it's not friends, it's pets. Seriously. Whatever that is, but you create that. And I learned that early on. My wife and I had our first little boy, and I was having a really hard time in a brand new play that I was working on as a director. And it was just a nightmare in the rehearsal rooms. And I'd come home, and the actors hated me, I hated them, And I'd come home, and I opened the door, my little 2-year-old would just wrap his body around my legs. And I realized that's unconditional love, right? And so it helped my compass to understand that this is really what's important. This is really important to me too, but I also have to understand my priorities. And the other part that I learned as I got better at my craft was to find the people that are going to make that place joyous too. Really, really important. My grandmother came to see this piece, maybe another piece, and they'd never seen any plays before. And that was really cool. My grandma only spoke Spanish, but she got some of it. And it was like, yeah, okay, cool. So, yeah, dream. And then, you're going to say, people are going to say, no. Always. It's par for the course. But believe in yourself, work at your craft, find community, and you don't have to go to New York to do it. You don't have to go to Los Angeles. You don't have to go to Chicago to do it. I've seen really great work in communities like what you have here in Madera. Great work. It can happen. The Old Globe in San Diego started as a community theater. And it's a world-class theater today. So you can do it here, if you want to.
Let's take one more from the audience. Oh, we've got 2 more.
Of course.
Just kidding. Let's do it here.
I worked with a lot of young high school and college students. So my question is, what was your path? How did you get to where you are now? What led you from living in Watsonville to being a playwright?
Right. Great question. I knew that I didn't want to work in field work all my life. And so in high school, I went to my counselor and I said, what do I need to do to get into college? And so she said, okay, this is what you got to do. And so I did. It was a challenge. And it was a culture shock when I left that little town to go to a university. I knew nothing. I wasn't prepared for that world. But I was stubborn, and I had to work at it. Work at it. The the other thing that was really important there for me at UC San Diego, where I went to school, it's the first time that I had ever seen any Chicano professors. I'd never seen that, ever, in high school, anywhere. And ironically, that one of those professors would be the first Chicano to ever get a PhD in theater in the United States, the first. And Dr. Cuervo Huerta. And he was the one that would then turn me on to, and to most of us who were in majors, we studied, I was a history major. We were all different majors, but he just hooked us into it. He just played his pipe, little pipe and flute, and we just all marched along to him. And so he opened up our world. And each time that I stepped into a new world, I was always usually the first or the only. And so what I learned is you have to keep that door open for others to come through, because there's so much talent out there. There's so many people hungry to tell a story, and we're talented, really super talented people. They just need that opportunity. So I hope that answers your question.
All right, last question, Mrs. Murillo.
Well, first of all, thank you for being here with us. It is a privilege to have you here.
Right back at you.
And my question to you is, you got to see a very engaged audience. I mean, there was a lot of connections. I mean, personally. I mean, we were able to connect in so many different ways. But my question to you is, how do you feel? How do you feel about, retelling these stories? And you have told us so many things, but how do you feel, do you relive this, the stories? I mean, I want to know. How do you feel when everybody else is telling the story again?
Absolutely. I was, there were times where I just kind of had to hold myself from falling apart, because they were, lived experiences, and they're not forgotten, but they're revisited. And like a good memory, and sometimes not a good memory, it triggers certain things in you. But looking back at that kid who wrote this thing 33 years ago, it's like, I see what you're trying to do. You could do this better, you could do that better, but, that's me now. But I'm glad that the universe came to me and to tell us and open the door to me to find it. Yeah. So, thank you. And Phoebe's artist only used to say, congratulations, you spent a lot of hours rehearsing, learning your lines, figuring out blocking, the musicians, the design, the crew, the staff. They spend a lot of time. I'll say one story. I had a student of mine. I taught theater at California State University for 30 years. And I remember this one student who graduated. Last year, his mother did not want him, kicked him out of the house because she said, well, you come home late all the time. He said, well, because I'm rehearsing. And she didn't understand the world of theater, and that poor kid slept in his car for that last year. And it occurred to me that from now on, when I'd see a parent, particularly a Latino parent, an immigrant parent, I'd go up to that, and that student would introduce me to their parents. I would say, I want to thank you so much for supporting your child, for being here. I just want you to know they're working really, really hard. And so when they come home, they're tired, but they're here. They're here. They're working here. They're not out someplace else. And because sometimes parents also need to be educated about the art form. They need to know that you're not causing trouble, you're actually doing art.
I'd like to close with this last request. As we mentioned, MTP is a partnership with the school districts. In fact, raise your hand if you are a student within the district, a student and or educator, or you work in education within this district. I'd like to ask you, what advice do you give us with this new theater company this growing arts community. What advice do you give to us moving forward?
Well, you're doing it. You're doing it already, you know, and what's so wonderful is this alchemy. The alchemy is, you know, I don't know how that happened, but it happened here. And it's a special thing. And cultivating that special thing is really, really important. You know, pass it on. Pass it on to the next person. Make sure, you know, that you bring your, you know, it's not just about an audience coming, but it's always about world building. It's about world building, and that means, how do we start with the younger ones? How do we get them to start liking what this is? How do we tell those stories? You know, the little ones. How do we get them? I write plays for young audiences, and that's, to me, another thing that is really important to me, is I want those young people to see themselves reflected. And for those young people who don't know, are not of that culture, to see, oh, there's another world here that I don't even know about, but I'm going to experience.
Thank you for being, and thank you for letting us have it.